So guys, today you need a horror podcast. Daniel Farrands, writer of Halloween 6. Nick, that was a hell of an interview we just got done with. A little preliminary for the people. I mean, how do you feel?
He was incredibly open, talkative. He didn't shy away from a question we asked. And I think the thing I came away with most was this is one of the good ones. Sometimes you meet people in this industry that you're like bummed. No, Daniel seems like a really, really good guy.
Yeah. And I want to let people know too, his audio was fantastic. I was worried because he was mobile. He was very gracious to give us his time. He was traveling. So his camera was off, but he did have the courtesy to put a Michael Myers logo for his picture, and his audio was fantastic. And me and Nick, we wanted to be super safe with our internet, so we both used our phones because the last thing we wanted to do was have any jitterness with Daniel. So our audio should be good, guys. But no, I'm not using my $400 Shure mic for this, but we had a great conversation with Daniel Farrands. I feel closer to Halloween. I genuinely feel closer. I'm going to be able to watch Halloween 6 now, and this is what I'm going to think of.
Yeah, I know that guy. I know that guy. He also said he would love to come back on again, guys. As you're going to hear, he has some projects in the works. If and when one of these projects starts shooting and is ramping up, especially if it's the big one that he told us about at the beginning, we will bring him back on here once that is a reality and talk to him about that and ask him more Halloween questions. So it was just a blast. I mean, it was truly a blast.
Yep. So guys, have a seat, get yourself a snack, get ready to watch Halloween 6 after this, and enjoy.
Hey now, what's up, everybody? Welcome back. This is a new episode of the Uneeda Horror Podcast. I'm here always with Christian. You know, we're a team, I guess. But we're joined today by one of probably our favorite guests we haven't even talked to him yet. We're here with Daniel Farrands today. A lot of you guys that listen to us, you obviously know he wrote Halloween 6. That's what a lot of you guys know and love him for. Daniel, thank you for taking the time. How are you doing, man?
I'm good. Sorry, I'm on the roads as we're speaking here. So the best I could do is my Michael Myers avatar for you guys. So I apologize for that, but it's great to be here.
Dude, it's an honor. And don't worry, you're good because this is obviously a podcast. So people are probably listening while they're driving as well.
Okay, got it.
I mean, it goes on YouTube, but it also, we go to the Apple Podcast and Spotify.
Perfect.
Daniel, it's like I said, it's such an honor to have you here. Halloween 6, you've done a lot of stuff. I would actually like to ask you, I'd like to just jump into some stuff. I watched a movie a few years ago without even knowing this was your involvement at all. It was a movie called The Haunting of Sharon Tate. And I really enjoyed it. And I grew up watching Hilary Duff all the time. She was on this Disney show as a kid. It was awesome. So I was like, oh God, Hilary Duff in this movie, Sharon Tate. Can you talk a little bit about this movie and what inspired you to do this? I would assume you have an interest in the whole Helter Skelter story and stuff like that to get involved in this kind of thing.
You know, guys, I'll be totally honest. It wasn't that I had a whole interest in the Helter Skelter and the Charles Manson thing. In fact, I'm so repelled by it that when I was approached by the same producers who had done me a solid and produced a movie that I made about a year before that called The Amityville Murders, and they really wanted to make this movie. I didn't know everything there was to know about it. Did a lot of research. And really what I came around to was just there'd never really been a movie from the point of view of the victims.
Right.
You know? And I felt like at the time my heart was in it because I thought, wouldn't it be great to tell that story, not only from their point of view, but what if these poor people who, you know, were the victims of the most horrific crime imaginable were able to somehow turn the tables on these motherfuckers.
Right.
And that to me was the start and the genesis of it, little knowing that the world had changed to such a degree that people literally lost their minds over this movie. lost their minds to the point we were getting death threats over this film. So
I didn't know about any of that.
You don't understand.
Tell me about it, please. I'm very fascinated.
I mean, it's just we just the internet has turned people into monsters and savages. No offense, not you guys. But
you're right.
I'm a savage.
The worst in people who probably aren't the best people to begin with, but who use the internet as a shield and as a reason to spread, hatred. And they just decided one day they needed something new to hate, and this movie seemed like a good target to them. So we all became the victims of their, insanity.
Now, was this something that started pre-production, Daniel, or was this something that kind of took you by surprise when the movie was coming?
Well, it took me by surprise because when the movie first started being shown around, it was winning festivals. Hillary won, I won. There was kind of a little momentum going on with the movie because it was different, and it wasn't exploiting the story and showing how these people were murdered and nothing ever, they never really had the justice that they deserved, other than the fact that these crazy people went to jail. Right. But, there was kind of an excitement around the movie initially. I think there were some skeptics about it, like, what is this going to be? And but no, the hate train started shortly after it came out. It didn't help that Sharon Tate's sister kind of went public and said, I don't approve of this. Although I had written to her and sent her what I felt was a very heartfelt message and explaining what my intentions were with the film and that I wanted to sort of create a story that was, even though it was a fantasy, it was kind of an empowerment story for these victims. But, people want to see what they want to see. And once somebody says it's good to hate this, they all jump on the train. So, and then it unleashes, I call it the Kraken of the internet, the real crazies come out. So it was scary. That's what I can say about that experience.
And Daniel,
and thank you, by the way, for the kind words, because I've gotten over the years, I think when people have actually seen the movie and they understand what it is and don't listen to all this BS, I think they understand maybe more what the intention was. And thank you for saying that.
Oh, Daniel, I tell you, man, it's like, when I watched it, I thought, wow, this really is refreshing because it is from a different perspective. And quite frankly, Daniel, I think it deserves maybe like some sort of a small renaissance now, because it actually is the kind of film that I think people are looking for in that type of, subgenre of like the reality kind of true crime stuff, because that's so popular. Yeah. And
I'll tell you, the last thing that was ever on any of our minds was like, oh, let's make a scary movie and show these victims getting killed. Like we derive some sort of sadistic pleasure from that. What offends me more are people who walk around with Charles Manson on a t-shirt like he's a fucking superhero.
Right.
That's offensive. But what we made, as for those who haven't seen the movie, and I don't want to give everything away, but it really is a fantasy. It's a dream. It's a dream within a dream, and it says it from the very beginning of the movie.
Right.
What the intention of the movie is. It's like they're all in limbo, and they're having to sort of. I always thought it was an interesting, and I don't mean just this crime. This crime is just unspeakable. But what I always thought, just from a storytelling perspective. And it's something I think just as human beings, we all wonder, we all think about life and death and mortality and what's on the other side, if anything. And I thought, if there is another side, and if your life is stripped from you so brutally and so quickly, and you still have a consciousness of the soul when you leave your body, would you even know what happened? Would you have any awareness of that? And that's kind of was the jumping off point for the movie. Of these kind of lost souls. And as you've seen the movie, you see there's nobody else in the movie except for them. And the reason for that, they're essentially ghosts, and they're coming to terms with their own deaths.
It's great to hear you talk about this, Daniel, because like I said, man, I was interested when I saw that Hillary was in this, and I thought I just thought it was a really good movie. And I want to tell the audience, I implore them to go search out The Haunting of Sharon Tate. The only other thing I want to ask about the film, if you don't mind,
sure.
is in fact Hillary herself. How did she come onto your plate for casting? Was that just happenstance, or
not happenstance? We went to her. One of our producers knew her manager. And they got it to her, and she was really intrigued, kind of what you're saying about it. Like, this is really intriguing. And, I know people will be sort of shocked by this movie because of the subject matter is so sensitive, even after 50 years. But she thought, wow, this is a really sympathetic portrayal of this woman that nobody's ever seen. She's like, even I didn't know much about her until I read your script, and you peppered in so many details of her life and what she was facing at that time of her life. Listen, the movie was never a biography. The movie was never a documentary, but again, the unfortunate part with that was it just struck a nerve with a certain group of people who just went apeshit and really made it very scary for all of us.
Yeah.
It's like you don't know who we are. You don't know what our intentions were here. You see what you want to see because you're kind of sick. So I don't know what to say other than I know where my heart was. I know where Hillary's heart was. I know where the entire cast and crew, where we were coming from. Not any of us would have made a movie that would have defamed these victims. Not for a second was that ever a fleeting thought in our heads.
Yeah.
We tried to approach it from without kind of sugarcoating it, because I think people really did forget how awful and brutal that really was. And I think that's shocking to people when they see it, kind of put out there. We didn't hold back from what that event was. We didn't sugarcoat it. However, if you watch a movie to the end, you see what the intention is. It's like, okay, they've been brutalized, and now they're going to take their power back.
Exactly. Yeah, man. It's so great. I really appreciate you going in depth on that kind of stuff, because it's a movie. I've always wondered
about it. I honestly didn't know if this would even come up. So,
Daniel, man, I'm telling you,
I appreciate it.
And it's genuine too, dude, because like I said, I watched it without when I put the film on and I saw your name on screen, it was a delight. But yeah, dude, it's a fantastic
I think the other
movie.
thing that honestly maybe I had going against me was I'm kind of known as a horror guy. So maybe some people looked at just that and thought, oh, he makes these bloody movies and this is a horrible human being who, the people that hate horror movies to begin with, or make assumptions about people who work in that genre. I mean, Wes Craven faced that early in his career, and Sean Cunningham certainly was called a pornographer when he was making Friday the 13th and Last House on the Left. So, maybe in a way I should just say, fine, I'm in good company. I'm being called terrible things because of a movie I made.
No, I mean, it's like, you're a filmmaker, you're a writer, it's like, yeah.
Well, listen, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it begins such a bigger conversation of like what's going on in this country in terms of censorship and artistic liberty and freedom and all of the things that are kind of really being challenged right now, And I'm not saying that was the case here, but when you kind of look at the political climate that we're in and the kinds of people who are trying to usurp power and take our choices away from us. I mean, how the hell are drag queens in the spotlight of being like what? Did they ever see Mrs. Doubtfire?
I hear you, Daniel.
Anyhow,
I hear you, brother.
Whole other conversation, guys.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, Daniel. Yeah, we agree. We agree with you. Christian and I were actually talking about that the other night. But so obviously, you see the poster behind me. You see Christian's shirt and his bust and everything like that. Yeah. So like. Obviously,
I just laugh. I laugh because I'm like, who in a million years would have thought? I'm looking at your tattoo now. For those who
got thorn tattoos, we love you, man. Big fans of you.
Too. That's so awesome. And I see the mask. I see the DVD. I see the poster. I see the hat. I think I have it somewhere.
Yeah.
Daniel, I've got 2 laser discs for Halloween 6. I've got the American and the Japanese laser disc.
How cool is that? I have the laser disc too from back in the day. Come to think,
dude, I'm a laser disc nut. But that's a whole nother conversation. Go ahead, Nick. Go ahead. Where are you going with Daniel?
Well, first and foremost, I just want to say when I first got introduced to you, like just seeing you talk about the movie was 25 Years of Terror.
Right.
And I was like so fascinated about the story behind that. And obviously the books Taking Shape have come out and we got the producer's cut on Blu-ray finally. So like,
right.
Oh yeah, a lot of this.
Years of begging. So
hey, I had a bootleg in the late 2000s.
I'm not surprised because everybody had one of those. And there was literally guys and maybe we've been in touch online and I just don't recall, but like there was just never a day or at least a week that ever went by during all those years that I didn't get an email or a DM from some fan somewhere in the world, like, when can I get the producer's cut? When is it going to be released? It was so now that those things have stopped. Well, actually not stopped because now I think it's not as readily available as it was a couple of years ago. So
no, yeah, but
that was meant to get that one out.
It's crazy that we got it. Like, and it's awesome that we got it. But the first thing that Christian and I want to talk to you about is we know that from your own admission that you were a huge Halloween fan going into this.
You have no idea.
So what was that meeting with Mustafa like? Like, where, because you had a Bible, right? Like a Halloween Bible.
Yeah. Because I mean, I was so young. You have to understand. I was 19 when I met him. You know, it was like months after Halloween 5 came out. So I'm dating myself here. And it was like being summoned to the principal's office as a kid. It's terrified, but it was so like, it's intimidating. It was kind of like your room now. Like it was like the posters were all over his office, and there was this man with, who I'd seen, I knew what he looked like. But there he is sitting behind his big desk with his pipe in his mouth. And I think just mystified, like, who's this kid walking in? Like who said that I would want to meet him? But I had written a script, not a Halloween script. It was a horror script I had written, and had figured out how to send it to a producer who worked for him, Ramsey Thomas, who produced 5. And for some reason, he read the script and he called me. He's like, I think this is really good, and we want to make Halloween 6, now. So we're meeting with writers. Come in. I'm like, what the fuck, really?
Wow.
So I spent, whatever, I had 2 weeks or something, maybe not even, to compile something. And of course, never really pitched a movie, much less one of these. And this was kind of like the dream come true moment for me, given my fanhood. And so I compiled this thing. Now it's called like the Bible of Halloween, that had the whole kind of history of all the films, all the character biographies. It had a family tree that was like pointing to all the different family members and where they were originated from and who was related to who and how they were related. And it had kind of like a whole kind of synopsis in a way of like where the series could go from that point. Right. What elements could we bring together to make it move forward into new stories? So I delivered that with my little, pitch, if you even want to call it that. I think he met with me for 10 minutes and it seemed like an eternity, but I just remember it was just suddenly over. And I left him the Bible, which, by the way, I had a friend of mine who was a graphic designer, had made like Halloween 666 and turned that A, like on your t-shirt there, into the thorn. That was my design for the Bible. Yes. Mm-hmm. I thought that was clever with that symbol. And I had also gone to a bookstore that was pretty famous here in Los Angeles at the time. It's no longer around, called the Bodhi Tree. It was like a new age bookstore. And I didn't know what that symbol was, that thorn.
The thorn symbol?
The rune, yeah. And so I actually drew it, I think, based on what was in Halloween 5. And I drew it on a piece of paper and I showed it to one of the guys that worked there. And he goes, oh, that's a rune. Yeah, but like, what is that? And he's like, oh, no, come with me. And he showed me a book and it was called Rune Magic. And I still have it, by Donald Tyson. And that's where the mythology came right from that, what that backstory was. So, yeah, I think I even photocopied like those pages of that book and included in the so-called Bible. So I leave it with Mustafa and I hear nothing for 5 years. And that's how long it took. I waited and waited and waited. And a lot of things happened in between with the franchise and the rights and everything. And lo and behold, one day I got the call, and it was Mustafa's office saying, "Come in, he wants to talk to you." And suddenly it was, we have a start date, we have a mask, and we have no script. What do you got, kid? And that's how it all started.
No pressure.
No pressure at all.
Daniel, this is kind of jumping way to the present, but like that Halloween Bible book, where is it now?
I would imagine it's in the, deep deserted cave that of where all things for Halloween go. I know Malik Akkad probably has it. That's what I would.
Have you never inquired to try to get it back?
Well, no, but I will tell you this: when I went in for the meeting 5 years later, it was on his desk.
Can you recall that reaction too? Like, because you give this to him as a fan and this all, but to see him keeping it and referencing it, I mean, what was that like?
Yeah, not only did he keep it and reference it, but the first thing he told me was, and I think Malik Akkad, who now obviously you guys know produces all the movies, they were like, "This is we use this. This is more about this than we know. So we go to your information when we want to know something about our own film series. He's like, this is so complete, like we've just kept it as a kind of resource. So I get, clearly I made some impression. And you know what? I think maybe it was that, that I went the extra mile and did all of that kind of homework that, kept me in their minds as somebody to, I was probably a last resort, because I think every other, writer in town had taken a stab, no pun intended, at that. And nobody came up with anything that was in any way, I guess, filmable for them, or that they agreed that was the right way to go. So that's where I got my chance. And that's how it started. Wow. And so I kind of pitched them in the room, like what it could be. And I remember the words that I said that Mustafa, his eyes lit up. And I said, it's Rosemary's Baby meets Halloween. And the second I used that little pitch line, his eyes were like, okay, I get it. Now I see. And sometimes it's, and then it was like, well, what, how is it going to work? What's going to happen? And I remember I had to sort of fight to bring the character of Jamie Lloyd back. They were like, what do we want? Nobody cares about that character. Let's just move on. And I said, no. We gotta have her in it, because, even if we pass the torch at some point to these new characters, she's got to be in the movie. So that was, I kind of fought for that. And then Mustafa was like, okay. Yeah.
Was he already dealing with the Weinstein brothers at that point when you were talking to? Because I want to say, Daniel, I've been reading these books. They're called Taking Shape and Taking Shape 2, which and they're so detailed. And if you could speak a little bit about how volatile Mustafa was with the Weinsteins, because I know we'll get into this maybe in this interview, but like, I know that they shut him out for reshoots at the end, and there's actually things I want to ask about you, what you wrote in your script that are kind of jabs at people, light jabs, but can you
I'm always so subversive. That's
oh, it's hysterical. But can you recall the first time you got wind that there was some serious friction between the Weinsteins and Mustafa?
Friction I didn't get at the beginning. I think there was a sense of like, oh, this is good because now we have a studio that's going to bankroll this movie. It'll get great distribution. You have to remember on Halloween 4 and 5, Mustafa distributed those movies through his own company called Galaxy. And, other than those movies, there weren't any big successful ones. So I think, listen, I can't speak to what happened with the rights. I know there was sort of a contentious thing going on between Mustafa and Hill and Carpenter, and then the Weinsteins, were basically kind of came in to say, okay, we'll bankroll this. Who'll make the movie the cheapest, or deal with us in a way. And I think it was kind of like Mustafa versus Carpenter and Hill at one point. Again, right. I wasn't there, so I can't attest to all of this, but this is my understanding. And the Weinsteins went with Mustafa Akkad and said, we'd rather work with you than them. So I think that started off as kind of like, okay, great, we know in business together, and this hopefully will be a fruitful partnership. But I think little did anyone, or certainly they know, or Mustafa know, who, what he was going to be up against, with these. Because you have to remember, like, Pulp Fiction had just come out. They were brand new. Like, they weren't, they were kind of just an indie label. And then around that time, Disney had come in and swooped in and bought the company from them.
Right.
They were still running it day to day, but the fact Disney was in this business suddenly, everybody at that time wanted to become, have their indie label. And I think Miramax was the first indie studio to be absorbed by a big corporate entity like Disney. And that had just all kind of transpired.
And on that same point, so obviously I know near the beginning and everything, things seem good and things are great. And, your script is being shot and that's awesome. At what point did you what was that like when everything started to change? When the reshoots were kind of not requested, but almost demanded. And then you guys were pretty much, you guys were stonewalled out of it. Essentially. It was like, no, we're doing our own thing here. And I had to imagine as a writer and a fan, you were probably like, this is bullshit. Like,
well, I was really upset and very vocal. As you guys probably have figured out, I expressed myself rather, vocally, and always was like that. So I guess that's the part of me that was always be the kid from Providence, Rhode Island. We tend to be more like in your face and like this is reality.
Mhm.
And some people don't like to hear that. But that being said, I knew things were not going to go as expected on day one of shooting.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah. It just all felt like, wait a minute, like this isn't the way I wrote it. You know, what are we doing? Like this.
Was that? Do you think that was the Weinsteins or Joe?
No. That wasn't them at that point. It was the director, I think, having not a lot of knowledge of the franchise as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was an assignment for him. I think it was a great one. I actually think he's a great guy. We got along fine. I just kind of got the feeling on the set, like, wait a minute, like this doesn't look right. Like, why didn't we build the Myers house? Like, that's the whole point. They're living in the old Myers house. Like, why can't we build it? Well, budgetary reasons, I think, but also I just felt like there was just a lot of people kind of in that middleman position, those middleman positions, production managers and line producers and people like that, who just, to them, this was just another movie. Let's just get it done. Let's come in under budget so we can all scrape together what's left and we can give ourselves bonuses.
Mhm.
You know, so it was, to me, it was like penny wise, pound foolish people at the helm. You know, and it wasn't necessarily Miramax at that point, although they had their say in not casting Danielle Harris at the last second, which was, to me, like, what the fuck? You know, so I kind of knew at that point, like, wait, this isn't going to be the movie that I had in my head when I, you know, busted my ass to write this thing in a month's time or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that I was so emotionally invested in it, you know, I had spent 5 years waiting for this call, and then
Right.
sort of started to see it being put in the hands of people who really weren't all that passionate about the series. And even when I would mention the fans, people would be like, well, fuck that. I don't care about that. You know, so I don't know. It just didn't feel like the right team, you know. And Mustafa and Malik was my age. You know, we were both kind of the rookies on the set, and nobody was kind of listening to us. You know, we would try to throw in any little thing we could to like make it better. You know, I remember there was a night when they were going to shoot the scene with Tommy, you know, Paul Rudd, like walking through the little town fair that they had at the carnival or whatever they had at the college.
Mm-hmm.
And the line producer was like, you know, and the script called for a bonfire, basically. You know,
I read about this, Daniel.
Mm-hmm.
I read about this.
they're like, we're not paying for that permit. That's like $500 to light those fires. And I'm like, what? So I think Malik and some PAs went around and got a bunch of garbage cans and lit them on fire. And that's why there's fire in the movie, because if it hadn't been for Malik and his subversive team, like, you know, we wouldn't have had it. It would have just been Paul Rudd walking through a you know, whatever, a bunch of
No fire.
Yeah. Paul Rudd. I mean, literally, it's like the old lady. She's like, and the huge fires were lit, and and literally, you were not going to see fire. There was no CGI back then, so we couldn't do that even.
Daniel, can I say a name to you, and you kind of give me your recollection of your relationship with this person?
Okay.
Paul Freeman.
Oh. Well, I just would say, you know, had a lot of experience. He was a personal friend of Mustafa's. You know, he was on the team of people that approved me as the writer. But I just never felt in particular that he was, again, very supportive of what we were trying to make.
That comes across in 25 Years of Terror as well.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Freeman did not seem like he was very fond of this movie.
No, and he just wasn't nice to the people who were working on it, you know. Just
so what was his MO?
I'll just say very old school. He's very old school, you know, like when you could kind of like be mean to your assistant and you could kind of order people around and act like you're the big boss, and you know. But I actually, there was a time I actually confronted him in front of Mustafa, and I said, listen, you know, what you're doing is not cool with me. You know, just like, as young as I was, I had enough self-esteem to go, oh, hell no, you're not going to like talk shit to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that. And then I remember it was either Mustafa or Malik called me and they're like, we're really proud that you did that. That was really good. You needed to stand up for yourself.
So Daniel, you say he's on part of the team that approves you as the writer. And
Yeah.
I'm not digging for you to talk smack about anybody. I want you to tell your story, because in the book.
Well, listen, no, I
Shape,
mean, I had a relationship with him. It wasn't the greatest one. I would put him on that list of people that I felt like was standing in the way of making the movie that we wanted to make, not helping that process very much. It was kind of like, let's get it done. Let's get it under budget. Let's just be done with this.
It was just a job. Yeah.
And did you get the sense that he figured you were the kind of guy, a young cat, you're just getting into the business, that he could
Yes,
he could walk over you?
Yes.
And that's maybe just the nature of the beast, right, in the movie business.
Well, I think that's, I mean, you're the new kid on the block, and I think he felt like I needed to like kiss the, whatever, the ring kind of thing. Like he was the guy, the big cheese, and I was just this young wannabe. But I really did have a passion and a vision for the movie, and I think that's what was so disappointing, at the time, was that I just sort of saw from the beginning, like, oh wait, we're not making the movie I thought it was going to be. However, I took the wins, like, oh my God, Donald Pleasance is here.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many cool things that.
Did you get to meet Donald?
I did, yeah. The first time I ever met him was on the phone. He asked to speak with me, and I think Malik facilitated that call to make that happen. And I remember hearing the voice over the phone, like Daniel, like saying your name. I think I almost passed out. But just to hear his voice over the phone, and he said something like, that he'd been waiting for this project for a lot of years, like we all had, and he was just happy that it was as good as it was, and he was really happy with the direction I was trying to take it. And he said, "You've made it frightening. This is the scariest one since the first one. I'm so happy to be a part of it again." So
true.
To me, that was like, that's all I needed to hear.
He works so well with the material. He's so good in Six.
So good. Yeah. I mean, listen, even in if you've ever read Carpenter and Hill's original screenplay for the first movie, all the dialogue was there, but Donald kind of made it his own. He took the words and kind of like elevated all that stuff.
Right.
And that's the most criminal thing, in my opinion, about the theatrical cut that was released, is how much they cut down his screen time.
Well, that's where the studio got involved, and they're like, he's too old. No kids want to see that.
It's just,
that was the studio.
Did you guys know, I don't mean to pry, but I do just want to ask, did you guys know as a team where Donald was at with his health? Like, were you guys aware that there were limitations and that,
yes. Yeah, we were. I mean, to the extent that I remember Linda, who was our makeup artist, and some of the people who were working with him, they just wanted to make him as comfortable as they could, because you could tell he was slowing down. You could see the way he walks in the movie. I mean, he's struggling a bit. Mm-hmm. So, not that we knew he had real health issues, but he was 74 years old or whatever he was at the time, and he was up there. And in 4 and 5, he had those like horrible burn marks. Somehow trying to explain that he'd survived that explosion in Halloween too. But they didn't want to put him through that again, so it was just sort of decided to not.
Skin grafts.
He would have been in a makeup chair for hours a day. They just didn't want to put him through the rigors of all of it and just make it as comfortable as they could for him. That's what I remember.
Yeah.
Daniel, I want to ask you about in taking shape. I thought this was really cool, and I'm hoping all this is true. Okay. That you kind of stood up for yourself in your writing a little bit. There was a notion in the beginning of the film where we hear Barry Sims on and can you confirm that it was in fact Howard Stern that they wanted to get?
Yeah. Well, 6? I suggested Howard Stern actually, and everybody kind of like loved that. Even the studio, they're like, great. But I think, if I remember, it was Richard Potter, who was one of the like smart guys at Dimension. I'm still friends with. I think he was kind of like, oh, that would be amazing for this movie, but I don't think we'll get him. But I think there were some initial, maybe they contacted his people, and they were right away. They were like, thanks, but he's making his own movie.
Private parts. Yeah,
I don't think nobody ever got as far as like reading the script or anything like that. But it was kind of like in our own circle, we were like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if it was somebody like him? And I was still hoping that they would put a name in the part. So my second suggestion was, why don't we make it Mike Myers? Like
groovy, baby.
He's coming to town. This is before that. But he was still Mike Myers. And I thought, how great would it be that he just comes and it's kind of like a publicity stunt, and they're going to do this thing. have him be the MC of the night or whatever. And everybody was like, "That's stupid."
That would have been hilarious.
But it would have been. I
yeah.
mean, whatever. That was my backup of
right.
that.
But going into this, Daniel, what I wanted to get to was, can you confirm that when you were writing the script, you got wind about this space movie that John Carpenter and New Line Cinema were going to try to do for their bid for the movie? So in the script, you take a dig at them in a playful way, where there is the radio host talking to somebody, and they make a notion. Didn't they send Myers into space?
Yeah.
That was in fact a reference. Because what's interesting, Daniel, is John Carpenter acts like he was trying to get away from Halloween since 1988. He refuses to. These two books taking shape, they blew me away, because I learned about a number of times that John tried to get back. This was one of them, where him and New Line. Do you recall the first time you? Because I would imagine that was really insider information back in the day of John and New Line trying their pitch for this film. How did you hear about that? Was it from Mustafa at the time?
No, I will tell you, and I kind of remember this, and I want to give credit where credit's due, and I don't remember specifically how it ended up. But what I do know is that wasn't in the original script, that line, and it wasn't even in the producer's cut. If you watch it again, it wasn't until the final cut that got inserted, and I think Carpenter had just done an interview in Fangoria saying this movie is going to be terrible. They should have gone with my idea. They should have put him in space. And since he was taking a dig at us, we decided to give it right back.
Dude, I feel you.
that was the intention. It was completely, I'll admit it was a dig at John Carpenter for being rude. But kind of
that's his trademark. That's his trademark.
It is. I mean, and I love him for it. That's fine. I'm on the Carpenter train,
but you can swing right back at him.
You gotta defend your. But what? I will say this: John was very nice. I mean, in those days, I don't think we had email. I think we had faxes. I had faxed his office asking where they had shot the Smith's Grove scenes in the original movie. I thought, wouldn't it be fun to shoot at least the exterior of that to make it match? And he faxed me back, and he told me where it was, and he was very nice.
The Hollywood Reservoir. I've been there. I'm assuming you've probably been too.
Yes, I have been there, but I was thinking about the building where Wynn and Loomis are walking.
Oh yeah,
and it was a surgical center somewhere, and I can't think of the name offhand, but maybe Altadena somewhere. They used to like to shoot out in that Pasadena, Altadena.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so it's not like he wasn't aware or being nice to us. I mean. Carpenter will tell you, he's like, I love when they make Halloween sequels because I get a big fat check.
Yep.
So that's
one more.
He didn't mind, throwing a little love, but that being said, he wasn't involved in all of that. But Deborah Hill was really nice to me. When I got the job, she called me and said, I'm so glad that it was you. I know how much this means to you, and I hope it's great, and so they can do a number 7.
Right.
At the time. But
she was a saint.
So she was such a class act and very nice. Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. There was one other line I wanted to get your confirmation on, Daniel, that I thought was also really funny. Going back to Paul Freeman, the book referenced that he thought it was a silly idea. I would assume more so we don't want to spend the money to go find this and shoot it, but he thought it was a silly idea to involve going back to the original Myers house in the movie, which was something that seemed like you wanted to do. So there was a notion in the film where Barry Sims calls his liaison in the film and says, we're going to take this back to the Myers house where we should have done it in the first place. Which
and he actually even says the real Myers house.
The real, which is, I'm taking it, it was in fact a rib at Paul Freeman.
It wasn't really at Paul Freeman. It was just the whole situation. It's like, well, why are we shooting this movie here? Like, that house still exists. Like, why are we not making this movie where it should be made? Why are we not using the house that was in the first movie? Why are we not making it a real Halloween movie? I didn't understand any of it, to be honest.
I'm pretty sure at that time too, that was right before the house got picked up and moved. That got moved in '94, so feasibly you guys could have.
We probably could have, and I know it was in real bad shape back then. I mean, it was looking like that old derelict, abandoned old house, that it was in the movie. So yeah, it wasn't in good shape at that point. But But that being said, we could have spruced it up. They did it in 1978.
Yeah,
they sure did.
It just, to me, would have made the movie authentic. Like, these people care about what we're making. It's just so ironic to me. And then in all these recent movies, that's like, they've got the house, they've got the this, they got the that, they're throwing money left and and it's like, who was fighting for this back then? No one.
Yeah, it's so crazy to think about that, because Halloween is my favorite series, and when you look where Halloween was in the late 80s and early 90s, it just wasn't a moneymaker as much, and now it's like insanity.
Mainstream. I mean, yeah, good for them and the success and everything, and money will get you certain things. I think the fact they got to rebuild that house. I mean, it wasn't the original house. They built a set and recreated it in very exact detail and did a great job with it. But we just didn't have the spoils of those kinds of riches in our movie. We were, I think, a $5 million film, which ended up becoming, I think, less than $4 million, because they were suddenly allocating money to reshoots for Hellraiser from our budget.
Oh, I bet you love that. I bet that was awesome news when you heard that.
Great. We're taking $1 million away from you so we can go. I mean, I don't even know if that one's exactly right, but I had heard rumblings of that at some point.
Well, Joe Chappelle also had to finish that one.
Yeah. He was definitely playing to the bosses. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I understood it, in a way. Like, he's a young filmmaker. I think he made one small feature, like an indie film. And, here he gets this call, and he's from Chicago. He's got a wife and a little kid. And I think they had a second one coming at the time. And he was.
So he wanted to work.
Of course. Who wouldn't?
Right.
And listen, that's not a bad train to get on at that time.
No.
The Miramax train. So the fact that he took the ticket, I don't blame him. But I also felt at some point he really kind of put Halloween on the back burner and was looking forward to other things other than like trying to make this movie as good as we could make it.
Yeah, and I just have to say, but I know Christian has a few more questions for you, but I just really wanted to say that I've noticed that casual horror fans usually aren't too big on like Halloween 5 and Halloween 6 and those middle movies, but the diehard Halloween fans, most of them have an appreciation for 6. And it is simply because I'm not just trying to butter you up, Daniel.
No.
We can tell you cared. We can tell you studied and you knew what you were talking about. And quite frankly, you did give us the probably most atmospheric and one of the scariest Halloween movies. And that's just a fact.
It's cool to say. Yeah, I mean, the atmosphere was so good because it was really fall. We started shooting the movie, I think, on October 30th. Not kidding.
Wow.
So, yeah. And it was not only... we didn't have to, like in the first movie, I think even in Halloween 4, they were just getting like bags of leaves and throwing on people's lawns, and and then they had to collect them because they couldn't afford more, so they'd move the bags of leaves around. We didn't have to do any of that because it was all waiting for us. It was like free production design. You kind of can't pay for that look.
Didn't it snow on like day 1 or day 2?
It wasn't day 1, but it was damn close, because I've never been so cold on a set in my life. Was that first day. And the first shot of the movie was the father, in his bathrobe, like, "You kids, get off my lawn," and that was, and I just don't know how he stood there with that bathrobe on, because it was like, it was probably 30 degrees, maybe colder, maybe in the 20s. It was freezing.
Lord, Bradford English.
And we had scarves and we had things. I mean, it was literally like it felt like you were in a ski resort. It was that cold. So, it was just not.
Well, you can't fake cold in these movies, and I hate when movies do it because you can tell.
No, it was freezing. I mean, the whole time. And then, yes, to answer your question, it started snowing, I think, within that first week. So all of this exterior work that we were going to do was like, well, now we're going to have to figure out how to do it inside. So that's why you had like a thorn symbol on a hay bale. Yeah, that was not in the script.
Daniel, we don't want to keep you too much longer,
we'll have. I've actually got about 20 minutes, if that's
perfect.
You guys.
So, Daniel, I read that the initial test. This is what I read in the book, and it's good to have you here because I can actually. Not that I think that the book is wrong or anything, because I really.
No, those books are great. I think they went into such great detail. But
they did, and I got to know the guy that wrote it. Yeah, I got to know the guy who wrote it, and he's really sweet. He actually sent me some of the other books he did.
Yeah, so nice.
Yeah, so I read that the test screenings were described by it could have been you and some of the people on the set as just a bunch of teenage kids that saw the first screening that completely hated the first cut, and it sent Miramax, it really sent the Weinsteins in an absolute frenzy of anger.
Yep.
Can you recall the
100%.
validity of that?
100% true. Yeah.
And what were your
the score was like in the 50s or some really low number, like really low.
Were you there for the screening?
No, it was in New York, and I was not invited to that. So, but I just remember, yes, there was a frenzy of like, and it was kind of me. I was like, listen, my job had been finished at that point, and I just remember sitting back and going, well, I told you so. Like, yeah, I mean, we should have made the movie that I thought we were going to make. We should have made a real Halloween movie. That to me was my contention. And I was like, where's the suspense and buildup? That was the stuff that was missed. I felt like the script had a lot more. And I'm not saying it was perfect, but I think that what I really tried to inject into each scene and each kill was like the suspense of the buildup and the tension and the misdirects and all the stuff that makes Michael Myers who he is, not just Jason walking, to a room and sticking an axe in somebody's head, it was always the misdirection. It was always like using the corners of that widescreen frame, which, again, day one, we're not shooting in scope. Why? I don't know. We'll just start. Again, nobody thinking about like what made that movie so artistic and so smart and why it's such a classic. And listen, you can never kind of repeat that. I'm sorry, but they didn't repeat it in the new ones. I'm going to go on record and saying it didn't.
That was the last thing we were going to talk to you about too.
Again, it's just too violent for my tastes. Everything I wrote in the script, the original Halloween 6 script, was very kind of suggestive, I guess. The violence was more off screen. I thought of things like Psycho and the original Halloween. You didn't see knives like impaling people and blood spurting all over the screen. I think
or heads going through,
exploding on fuse boxes.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I didn't write that, so to me it was just sort of shocking, and in a way, I just remember feeling very defeated. Like, oh shit, this is my first like big produced movie, and it's the one that I dreamed of my whole life, and now they've kind of turned it into this like weird amalgam of like of just all this stuff from other horror movies that just didn't work, and in terms of the gore and the immediacy of everything, and not really taking the time to build the tension. And for me, that's the point of Halloween, is the tension, not the gore.
Yeah.
So that's.
Can you kind of like, for the person listening to this that is just a fan of these movies and stuff, can you talk about how crazy the notes were day to day from shooting that you guys were getting? Because I read that it was like, there you go, your reaction, because I would assume this film almost kind of jade you on the movie business and how things go, because it was so insane. Can you kind of talk about how many studio notes you had to deal with on a daily basis?
I mean, I literally spent most of, like, I was there in Salt Lake City with everyone for, I don't know, a couple weeks at least. And I really spent very little time on the set. I was mostly maybe holed up in my room addressing all this stuff. I mean, some of it was like, okay, you can make that change. But then some of it was just really like, oh my God, it's like taking the thread out of a well-sewn quilt and and watching it all kind of fall to pieces. It's like, you can't just take the spine out of it, and some of the notes sort of felt like it was doing that. And then when the reshoots came about, I was actually kind of thrilled to hear they were going to do reshoots, because I thought, oh, cool, we can go back and add all the scary stuff in that we didn't shoot. To me, I thought we were just going to go in and like extend scenes, make them more tension filled. And lo and behold, that's not what they decided to do. And they had other writers who were not credited, but maybe should have been. I'll name one of them. I think was Rand Ravitch was his name. I feel like he's written several movies. I mean, like The Astronaut's Wife. Do you guys remember that movie?
Yes, Astronaut's Wife. I know that movie.
I think he made that. He's the one that wrote the whole ending of that. He wrote that whole laboratory, babies and fish tanks and all that stuff like came from him. And then I came in and tried to clean it up. I remember there was one version where they had Marianne Hagen's character, Kara Strode, running around a mental institution with a machine gun.
You're kidding me.
No.
Actually, I read about that now that you say it.
No. The dialogue, and I can remember it, and I think my mouth hit the floor, where it was Paul Rudd had to say, and I can only imagine what he would have said if he'd seen the line before I went in and said, hell no. It was literally, he throws Kara a machine gun and says, ever used one of these before? Yes, I mean, I'm a little virginal college girl, sexually repressed college girl living with my parents and my, my fatherless son. And I've used lots of machine guns.
Jesus Christ.
I fucking know what the hell was going on. So, I mean, as bad as things got, it could have actually been worse.
It sounds like it.
Yeah. So there were little things that I kind of like stepped in and was able to kind of put my foot down. Not that I had any authority or anything, but at that point, you have to understand too, like the Akkads, they didn't get kicked off the project. They walked off the project. When they saw where Miramax was going to take this thing and how they were going to run this show, they were like, bye. And I remember standing there at the production office. I think I had just, been up all night rewriting these terrible pages or whatever, and then dropping them off. And I remember it was me and Joe Chappelle standing in a hallway where all the offices were. And it was Paul Freeman and the whole battalion packing up their briefcases and walking out the door. And we just sort of stood there like, well, bye. I guess they're leaving. And so it was just an immediate, like, that's where the big time, problems were with between the Akkads and Miramax. And I think there was a lawsuit that resulted from all of it. It was a big mess, you guys. So yeah.
I read that Mustafa pulled the plug on the lawsuit because he thought it would just end up being a really bad press thing for the movie.
I don't know. I feel like they settled it. I don't know that he pulled the plug. I think they just settled on, hey, you can never do that again, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The problem was, I think, because, I mean, we can say whatever we want about the Weinsteins now. The world knows how evil and corrupt they always were.
Right.
All that's been exposed, thankfully.
Absolutely.
But he really, they really, from my understanding, they really held their Halloween rights hostage, I guess is the best way to put it. They would wait until the last day, and then suddenly renew the option that they had to make another movie.
I mean, they famously did that with Hellraiser.
Yes.
They made those straight to DVD ones simply because they were like, yeah, we're not putting anything out, but we don't want anyone else to have it.
Well, I feel like there was one point, and it might have been maybe after 8, that they literally, to keep it, they sent some student crew out onto the streets of Bulgaria to shoot a scene with Michael Myers, some guy wearing the Michael mask and saying, well, we're making a movie, so you can't take the rights.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
No kidding.
No, not kidding. That's how crazy they are.
It sucks so bad.
So no, I mean, I always felt for, I certainly felt for Malik, because after his dad passed, he had to deal with all that crazy shit. But luckily that's all in the past. And moved on.
Yeah.
Made it successful. So, I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy hearing about the Weinsteins and how controllish they were. I mean, we heard Rob Zombie. He was on Charles Band, the guy who runs Full Moon's podcast, and Rob talked about having just complete. You hear Rob talk so calm. He doesn't really raise his voice, and he describes having screaming matches with Bob Weinstein, and it's just.
Yeah.
It's
the one thing I have to, and again, this is just, my feelings for Mustafa are only, he was like an uncle to me in a weird way, I mean, he was kind of cranky in his own way, and he always make little remarks, but I loved him, and I owe him my life in a way. So, but I will say he made a real effort and a real concerted effort to protect me from those people. He never let me deal with them directly. And
that's incredible.
He wanted to take the brunt of their shit. He's like, you're not going to get in the way of this. He was always my buffer there. He never let them get to me.
Wow.
So that was nice. So
yeah.
He was that, he was an artist friendly. He was an artist. He was a director. He wasn't just a movie producer. He directed his own movies. I mean, epic, big movies. Lion of the Desert and all kinds of those kind of grand, Anthony Quinn movies in the desert, and just, really epic scale, multi-million dollar movies. So he knew, the difficulties that, you face. So I think he was just a very filmmaker friendly producer. That's how he was. And he was very fatherly, you know what I mean? Like, he was always he cared about the team, And I think he also hired people that he thought he could trust to deliver it. And then unfortunately they did not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, looking back on it, Daniel, I mean, I know that it was crazy, and I know that there was a bunch there, but like, looking back on it, I hope that you are proud of the script you turned in, and what of yours did end up on screen, because like, when you look back on Halloween now, like, are you happy for that experience, all things considered, or is it, like Christian said, were you a little jaded? Like, were you like, I don't know if I want to do this?
I don't know that I was jaded. I felt like, what it was at the end of the day, it didn't matter that the movie wasn't what I wanted it to be. It was a produced movie. It was in theaters. It made millions of dollars. So that alone just gets you access to people who never would have spoken to me, who would have never taken a meeting with me. I would have never had an agent or a lawyer or the things that happened. So it really was the thing that kind of opened some doors and made it possible for me to do lots and lots of other things. So, I mean, I'm eternally grateful for that experience. I'm eternally grateful to Mustafa Akkad and his son Malik, and to the fans who've been so, like, you guys, so sweet and kind, and just the fact that we're talking about this movie, like, 27 years down the road. I never, ever in a million years thought I would be, that this would still be part of my life all these years down the road. So that to me is a thrill.
And how is it to have your movie on 4K UHD?
Awesome. I who knew that this technology would go so far, and it would have this, it would look better than it did in theaters back in the day. Remember, like, ours was shot on film when they actually used film. So, it wasn't a digital movie at all.
And I know you said that you prefer the producer's cut, but still the producer's cut is nowhere near what you had.
No. To me, that it always felt like a rough cut, like it was an incomplete movie. And then when they went to quote unquote complete it, they just kind of made something else. And I tacked a bunch of scenes in that had nothing to do with the movie. So it was just a big, to me, jumbled mess when it got released. But yeah, in terms of the intention, I would say the producer's cut is closer. I just wish it had the suspense and the tension and the payoffs and little things that I worked so hard to include. And then ultimately, I think in the hands of some of the bean counters, we'll call them, just turned it into something they made it as simple as they could and with the least amount of inconvenience. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes total sense. So, Daniel, wrapping this up, you kind of hinted at it before, but I remember Nick, when we were talking about when we were going to interview you, Nick said, "You know what? I can't wait to ask him about the new Halloween films. I'm dying to know what somebody involved with the series."
Halloween Ends. I fucking love Halloween Ends, but I do not love the trilogy as a whole. I have a lot of issues with it, but I loved Ends because, like Halloween 6, like Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, movies I love in this series, they were like, fuck it, let's do something totally different.
Completely off the map. Yeah.
Yes.
Where are you at, Daniel, with these films?
I usually don't like to kind of like throw my hat into that, because I just know this is somebody else's very, very, very hard work that went into it. For me, I just didn't feel like, with all the resources that were at their disposal, I still felt like it was not quite there. Like, I didn't feel the heart and the horror of, I mean, even like Halloween 2 felt like the first movie to me, just the way it was shot, the way it was told, the music, I don't know. It just for me, maybe it's just because I'm older and maybe, like you said, maybe more jaded about the whole series at this point. I just didn't feel it. But
this might be a dumb question, Daniel, but would you come back and do a Halloween movie?
I've been asked that a few times.
I mean, it's Malik and no longer the Weinsteins.
And it was the two of us kind of like figuring it out along the way and making decisions that we both knew were for the best of of the piece rather than, the bean counters. Sure. If there was something more to do, and I don't know at this point, they've done it all.
That was my next question. Where would you even go?
I mean,
Where would you go?
Put him in a meat grinder or whatever at this point.
Yeah.
So I don't think
Yeah.
I think they really meant ends. I don't know. I mean, I certainly wouldn't do something dumb like taking him to outer space. Sorry, John Carpenter. But and Jason already did that anyway, and Leprechaun, I think.
Yes, he did.
Yes, they did.
That's always the death knell. But I mean, it would just have to be the right thing, to be honest. It would have to be like taking what we know and then just saying, okay, now we're gonna do this with it, and not ignoring everything, but in a way kind of acknowledging it and moving on to the next piece of whatever that story might be.
Well, you guys heard.
I honestly don't know what it would be, so I'm not giving you a good answer, so I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
You did great. Daniel, I want to ask you this in closing.
Okay.
I in the beginning of this, you sounded like you were happy that I actually brought up The Haunting of Sharon Tate, and I want to ask, as somebody who's obviously done a lot of things in his career, but being known for Halloween 6, do you ever have a certain feeling about that one type of way? Like, is it a blessing or a curse to you? Where you know what I mean?
Yeah, because to Carpenter, it's almost like a curse. It kind of pisses him off.
See, I don't look at it the way he does. It's all been a gift for me. I was like the kid that just, you have no idea how much I idolized these movies. I mean, when I went to my high school reunion, the 10-year reunion, which was not too long after the movie came out, everybody was like, "Of course you did. We knew that when you were making these movies in junior high school, Halloween this and Halloween that, and like it was who I was. It kind of like became my identity in a weird way. Like this was before fan fiction and all that stuff. But I could make movies on VHS portable, recorders and things like that. But that's how I kind of like really sort of established my social circles and everything else was, my love of these films. So the fact that I got to actually, write one and have my creative input on one and the series, and that sort of lives on all these years later, is like, how do I look at that as anything but like the realization of an actual dream come true, and the fact that those things actually can happen in life? It's really kind of breathtaking to me and unbelievable, even all these years later.
And don't sell yourself short. Christian and I would say, not only did you write one, you wrote one of the best ones.
Oh, you guys are so nice. I that honestly touches my heart. It really does, guys. So thank you.
Daniel, I'm telling you, man, it's Halloween's, like, people love this movie so much. And it's so great when you talk to people that sometimes for me, I'm not a very descriptive person, and maybe sometimes it's hard for me to explain why I love it. But when it's like the fans that love it, they just get it. They get it. There's this almost untangible thing to it that it's got this X factor that you can't really describe, but the movie is like an old friend, and you love to revisit it, and it's very comfortable to put the movie on and sit through. And
I hear for a lot in the past, I don't know, 5-6 years or whatever, maybe longer now, but like I do hear from those fans that have that sort of nostalgia, this nostalgic place in their heart for this movie, because it was the first one they experienced in a movie theater. With friends, or that their dad took them to see it, and he's since passed, and it kind of galvanizes a moment in their lives, and that is the amazing thing about cinema. We can all kind of place our moments of our lives and our own stories, and where were we when we saw this, and if it made an impression on you in any way. So for that, I'm like so grateful. You have no idea.
Yeah.
Like,
and
that I was that kid who had that experience with the first movie and the second movie. That just means everything to me. So
when it comes on TV on AMC, do you ever just sit there and say, you know what, I'm gonna watch it? Do you ever have those moments?
I don't. I usually
You've probably seen it enough, huh?
No, it's just because then I'll revisit all the fuck ups, like in my, I'll just be like, oh, this is
right. I'm sure you can't watch the movie without.
I can't watch it.
Yeah. Well, you have to think about. You probably have memories of, when they were filming this, I know exactly what was going on. I
didn't know I was standing off camera, so
oh wow.
I literally, I'm like 5 feet away.
Are you going to be at 45 Years of Terror?
They haven't asked me yet, but I will try. I'm maybe shooting something in the fall this year, so I don't know if I'll be.
I was just about to ask you.
If
Said you were working
I
on something.
totally would come. Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Are you able to tell
Daniel?
us what you're working on?
Oh, I've got there's 3 projects that are kind of in the works. Two are very close to getting off the ground. One of them, I'll just say what it is, and I'm excited about it. Is we're gonna do a remake of a movie that you guys are too young to remember, but I bet you've seen it, called Happy Birthday to Me.
Dude, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's awesome. And it's a public thing that you're able to discuss.
It's on IMDb, so I figured I can talk about it. So
dude, that's great.
Wow.
That movie got a kind of like a new renaissance with the horror fans because Arrow Video put out the Blu-ray and I got it.
Yes, that's right.
That's fantastic.
We're working on that. I'm hoping that's the one that's going to go this year, like sometime this year, and that might be the one that keeps me away from doing the 45-year reunion. But that, and then I've got another original script that I've written that's we're getting close to. We might actually shoot that one in the summer. It's a horror slasher that to me just takes me right back to all the stuff that I loved about horror movies and 70s movies. And in particular, roller skating movies. So,
oh, really?
So it's a horror movie set at a 70s roller disco.
Dude, that sounds fantastic.
Get Rob Zombie to direct it.
Yeah.
And Daniel, I hope it becomes the next Terrifier 2.
Oh God, yeah. Well, that would be great. I mean, God bless those guys. I mean, they've just that's insane.
Yeah. Well, when they see your name, people are going to want to support it right away. I'm telling you. So
thanks, man.
That's awesome.
That's
so good.
Cool of you to say. But yeah, no, we're excited. We're just we're kind of in that stage of like trying to put all the last minute pieces together on these things. So hopefully both of those will be going sometime this year.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, Christian, you want to wrap her up? We don't want to keep him forever.
Yeah. Well, Daniel, dude.
Well, anytime I can always come back and we can pick up wherever you want to leave off.
We would love to do that. So
okay.
Yeah. Daniel, I just want to say, from the bottom of my heart, man, like as a kid that just starting a YouTube channel a little over a decade ago now, just being a fan of the movies, to be sitting here talking to you, and the same with Nick and me. Me and Nick have known each other very long. We met through YouTube, and for us to be here,
cool. I just love that. I mean, there's a lot of things about the internet I don't like, but I would say things like what you're telling me now, I love that. So it's amazing.
It truly is a blessing for both of us, and we're extremely grateful that not only did you offer us your time, but you were so open with us. And I'm hoping
that's kind of one of the things I just am. So like if you have a question, I'll just answer it.
And I'm hoping we try to go out of our way. We really want to ask you stuff that maybe isn't just so run of the mill or stuff that you don't get asked.
Oh God, you guys have the greatest questions. Like you actually challenged me a couple times there. I had to think, but no, that was good. I can tell that you guys really understand it and have done a lot of research and read all the. You might at this point know more about it than I do.
Well, So Daniel, thank you so much, man. We just really appreciate you.
Of course, anytime.
Yeah, you can take off when you're ready to go. Me and Nick are gonna do a little thing for the closing of our podcast. But
all right, guys.
Thank you, Daniel, so much. The fans love you.
Thanks. Love you guys too, and take care of yourselves. Be safe, and we will talk soon.
Thank you, Daniel.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.